Upton Sinclair, both writer and political activist, became very popular amongst political progressives in the early 1900s and was widely known in the workers' rights movements that took place in factories all over the new flourishing United States. In his greatest work, The Jungle, Sinclair becomes widely known for his undercover expose on the meatpacking industry, eventually gaining enough public momentum to create a lifelong career of progressive politics reaching all the way to newly found California. Sinclair was born on September 20th, 1878, in Baltimore, Maryland, to Upton B. Sinclair and Priscilla Hardin Sinclair. Upton Sinclair's childhood was one of duality. One side of his upbringing was shadowed by an alcoholic liquor salesman, and on the other side was brightly belittled in the light of his mother's upper-middle-class family. It is said amongst historians that this completely contrasted upbringing may have contributed to Sinclair's socialist politics later in his life. In 1904, Upton Sinclair found himself working for Chicago's Appeal to Reason, the newspaper that sent him to write an expose of the working conditions on the meatpacking industry, creating Sinclair's most memorable work, The Jungle. Although this novel was rejected by publishers left and right, the novel was eventually published in 1906. Sinclair's vivid descriptions of working conditions in meat factories were of such disgust to the American public, it ultimately led to a change in the way the U.S. population shopped for their food. With such exposure about America's supposed thriving workforce, Sinclair's writing stocked bookshelves all across America and was even printed into 13 different languages. The expose was of such importance, even Theodore Roosevelt, who was opposed to Sinclair's socialist beliefs, invited him to the White House for dinner. Not too long after, the Pure Food and Drug Act and the Meat Inspection Act were both passed. 1906 was expected to be a year of public discontent with not only the nation's food supply, but with the conditions laborers were forced to be in. But with these two new laws passed, thanks to Upton Sinclair's expose, the greater American public had an increased confidence in the food and drugs they consumed, despite the jungle. Sinclair ultimately disagreed with the approach these new laws took, but they created a wedge between federal regulation and private industries. This new strategy became only one of many in the early 20th century for progressives to regulate big business in an ever-growing market of consumerism. Progressives were of major support to Upton Sinclair's works and eventually began to criticize major corporations for being about money instead of the people. Progressives were typically journalists and began the movement of transformative media. He also turned over the next chapter of workers' rights, bringing on the era of muckraking, journalists who uncovered the dark side of society. Blue-collar workers started to hold their own employers accountable and encouraged people to ensure their own working rights, all because of Sinclair's newly found voice in American journalism. In the 1920s, Sinclair married his second wife, Mary Kimbrough, and moved to California in pursuit of newfound politics. Sinclair also initiated a new movement or even migration into California through his promises to put an end to poverty if he is elected governor. During the Great Depression, he entered electoral politics and ran as a socialist governor in 1930, then as a Democrat in 1934. In the latter election, Sinclair promoted EPIC, End Poverty in California. This program was designed to buy idle factories and abandoned farms and turn them into cooperatives for the unemployed U.S. population. With EPIC headquarters in Los Angeles, with him came a new influx of migrants into the new California workforce. Overall, nearly 40% of the working class voted for Sinclair and his promise for a more socialized workforce. Although he wasn't elected, he is still credited for the mass labor migration into California, thus resulting in our now third richest economy status. Sinclair's legacies went to live on through early cinema with the Hollywood version of Sinclair's The Jungle in 1914. His famous novel Oil was also created into a film in 2007's There Will Be Blood. Upton Sinclair went on to write many more novels throughout his journalism career. His novel Dragon's Teeth, about Nazi Germany, won the 1943 Pulitzer Prize. None of these novels, however, achieved the success of The Jungle. Upton Sinclair, credited for muckraking and the push for a more socialized workforce, is one of the most influential journalists in American history because he didn't fear the authority he was writing about. Sinclair dove headfirst into a world of the unknown and paved the way for media as we know it.